I just remember as a 17-year-old, being in the hospital, coming, just having this kind of moment. I guess you'd call it a come to Jesus moment as well, where I'm sitting there and I'm looking at mortality in a way I'd never looked at it before.
Welcome to Think Better Together, a mental health podcast brought to you by mindsconnected.com.
Well, Paul, I'm so glad that you joined us today. It's such an honor to have you here. And I would love for you just to take some time and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you and what you got going on.
First, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this, mostly because I know you, and every time we've connected, it's been truly a meaningful connection. And I appreciate that so much. So
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for having me, man. I guess primarily, right now I'm a mindset coach. I work with professionals, executives on a topic of mindset and, maintaining healthy long-term performance, avoiding burnout, recovering from burnout.
Sweet.
I'm fairly passionate about that, and
Yeah,
we'll dive into this, but
would love to.
a lot of my writing will lean into that concept, that topic. I've been married for 8.5 years now, which is wild. She's the better half of me. And I, I am so very, very just excited to be able to call her my wife. We've done a lot of growing together. Her name's Alicia. Like I said, we've been married for about 8 years, and we're expecting our first actually in a few months.
That's awesome.
By the time this comes out, maybe she'll be here, but we're really excited about that.
Sweet.
Big changes.
Man, I'm so glad that we get to hang out in this way. And to me, it's like you're one of those people that I just love picking your brain. You read, you study, you listen, you think, you're working with people. And really that is going to be so fun to talk about more of the professional side. And I think that what is helpful for our community and really both of our communities is that sometimes we can see someone's professional side and not recognize that there's a person behind there. And so that personal side is what I think would be awesome if we could start with, if that's cool with you. So if you could kind of help us and just, let's just start with like where you were born and who was in your family back in the day. Could we start there with your childhood?
Yeah. So I was born on a beautiful island of Jamaica. And I like to stress the island part because whenever I say that, when I lived in New Jersey, they would think Jamaica, Queens, in New York. And I'm like, no.
No.
I like
to
think it's the real Jamaica.
That's so cool.
The one surrounded by water. But born in Jamaica, had, I like to think a really, really fun childhood, fraught with lots of adventures and things that we can dive into. My family is as crazy as I think any really big family gets.
Yeah.
I'm one of 4, the second oldest, right? I have 3 sisters, and
the only boy,
a lot of people
holding it down.
Yeah, my sisters like to call me the favorite. But they use it to their advantage, though. So
sure.
if they want something, they'll ask me to ask for it, and typically they'll get it.
Yeah, you're the ambassador of the siblings. That's cool.
Yeah. But as much fun and exciting as my childhood was, because I lived in Jamaica up until I was about 8. 7, 8 years old, and then I migrated to the States. Actually, I came to the States for like a trip to Disney, and I got really, really sick. Like one of my lungs collapsed, and
that is really
I
sick.
ended up being hospitalized. Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And I ended up being hospitalized, and that was like the first real overwhelming bout for me. As a conscious child, because there are some other things that we'll get to in terms of my father and losing him when I was like 2 weeks old. But
Okay.
at about 7, 8 years old, I had this episode where, because I have sickle cell and whatever the
Mm,
the issue was,
yeah.
literally just one day playing outside with my cousins, and one of my
Hmm.
lungs completely collapsed, and the other one
Yeah.
was functioning at half capacity.
Okay.
And so, they rushed me to the hospital. The doctor's like, "Hey, we don't know if we can save him at all, so start
Wow.
praying."
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
It literally got to the point where I was in a coma for a
Mm,
little while, and they called my mother, who was still in Jamaica at the time, and told her to prepare for my funeral because they were pretty confident that I
mm,
wasn't going to make it.
wow.
And long story short, by the grace of God,
Yeah.
my doctor, whoever that individual was, uh, they had a medication that was still in
Okay.
trial, still
Yeah.
in clinical trial. I think it had been used on maybe 7 people before me.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
and they decided, kind of a Hail Mary, to try that medication, and it worked out, and I'm here. So
Yeah.
very
Well, I
grateful
am
for
grateful
that.
for that
Oh
medication
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
As you
Yeah.
were describing it, I was thinking about you being there in the hospital originally with your mom, but she
Yeah.
getting that call. Oh my goodness.
No, I
Yeah.
I was in a whole different country.
Yeah.
There were a few times they said when I would kind of, uh like, as I was kind of fading in and out,
Hmm.
I would be asking for my mom and, like, thinking the nurse was my
Yeah.
mom.
Okay.
Just as a
Yeah.
kid in that mental
Sure.
space and
Mm.
going through that kind of trauma and thinking, like, you kind of want your mom.
Hmm.
I'm what, 6, 7, uh, and towards the end of that, she was able to get her visa and come up and and be there for the very end of it, but still quite an experience.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
Yeah. So she's having to try and get her visa and get over there to see you. That's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah,
Man,
yeah,
I'm so glad. So glad that they were working on something and that it worked to help you
yeah,
be here today. You kind of put a pin in your dad on that side of
yeah.
things. Did you feel comfortable telling us a little bit more about that?
Sure. S- some folks know this. I don't think a lot of people do,
Yeah.
but I've had a very, when you think about the African American community,
Mhm.
and some of the statistics, unfortunately, I've
Okay.
fallen into quite a few of those. Whereas my dad, for example, though he was from Jamaica, was
Hmm.
involved with some of some very, very bad and wrong people.
Yeah.
And eventually it got to the point where it cost him his life.
Mhm.
Sadly, I
Yeah.
was 2 weeks old when he lost his life, and so
Mm.
my
So
entire
sorry, man.
life I've
Yeah.
never, that's never been something
Yeah.
that I had or experienced, and that
Mm.
certainly has an impact on my mindset as I'm looking towards becoming
Sure.
a father. And
Yeah.
that's,
Important.
I'm sure this is stuff you're probably familiar with, but it's new to me
Mm.
as I'm processing this, even
Yeah.
as a mindset coach, like, man, this is okay, let's see how
Mhm.
this goes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because sometimes when we lose our father early on, of what I've seen with some people, is that it's like the template that you're grabbing from is not very big. You're
yeah,
2 weeks old. I mean, you don't remember a lot, if anything, most people at that point. And so I just think that you in some people have had to say, am I going to just use more of a blank slate or a canvas to determine, what is fatherhood going to look like for me, or am I going to look more culturally and see, like, what are some of the elements of that I've lived through and that I've gained in becoming a man, and
yeah,
engaging with my wife, and really almost like a build your own type of fatherhood,
yeah,
parenthood type way. And I'd love to get more into that here. So, can we
yeah.
pick up there at we'll kind of pause that and then pick up there, like what happened next? What was that? That was a challenge for you, but what's something like a fond memory that you remember of your childhood?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, and this is so
Yeah.
random, but
Cool.
after that episode, and yeah, the time I was in Florida with my aunt, and just kind of lived with her. There was a season while living there where we lived in Miami, and so
Okay.
there were times where this is long before I moved to New Jersey and figured out what
Gotcha.
snow was, and
Mm,
the drama of my life that would be. But there were times
yeah.
where she would pull us out of school, myself, my cousins, just to go to the
Mm,
beach. like
that's awesome.
like that was every time I think about my time living in Florida, that's one
Hmm.
of the things I loved the most.
Hmm.
And similarly in Jamaica, that just triggered
Yeah.
a totally different memory. There are times where as a family we'd get up and kind of go to we'd go to a beach or a hot spring or something, but
Yeah.
this was before Jamaica. If you go there now, everything is sort of a tourist attraction, and
Hmm.
uh, people have to make their money, I guess. But there was a time when, especially when I was young, where we would get up and my uncle, who was, the older of all the siblings, I guess,
Yeah.
he would take us, my aunt, my cousins, to this hot spring, and there was the way to get to it. It wasn't a paved path or anything. It was just
Yeah.
literally you're just kind of walking through the jungles of Jamaica,
Hmm.
and then you come to this
Yeah.
opening. And I
Yeah.
like it really was kind of this serene, surreal kind of experience
Oh
for this
man.
to just be a native experience that now
Yeah.
it's probably hard to get, but
Oh,
when
for
I think
sure.
about those experiences, it
Mm.
it blows my mind. Like I am just fascinated with how those experiences shaped me and how I've come to value just those mini adventures, where you
Yeah.
can take pockets of time with family or friends and go someplace, do something that you just really can't find anywhere else.
Yeah. I would love to build on that. Like, how do you think, just kind of reflecting now, how do you think that that has shaped you? Experiences like that,
Um,
like growing up in a place like Jamaica and seeing that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
In a weird way, I think it both makes me in large part who I am in terms of my
Mm,
perspective and how I
okay.
view life and how life is meant to be lived and experienced, and the time and the quality of time you spend with people and what you spend that time doing with them. And then on the other hand, it's also made me very annoying as a human being because I'm constantly looking for the adventure. Like I always want to go someplace or do some,
Mhm.
even if it's just going for a walk. Like I
Yeah.
want, not that I'm necessarily chasing experience, but I guess, I mean, that's one way to look at it,
Yeah.
where I'm just kind of, I want to adventure. I want to adventure through life,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah.
With my wife, with my friends, with my community.
Sure.
I want to adventure through life.
That's cool.
And I think that's a part of why I'm a coach now.
Yeah.
I get to almost vicariously
Mhm.
help others figure out how to adventure through life and find their strengths in looking at life differently, more positively, and navigating life that way. So
I like that you were able to dig a little bit deeper and see that. And I think that at least just giving us a little bit of a picture of, you have your hospitalization, I would say near death experience,
yeah, yeah,
miracle of a medication or treatment that helped you, and then you have
yep.
these other great things. And so let's take both of those just as examples. I mean, I know that stories are so big, losing your dad, the hospitalization, and then these moments with your aunt taking you out of school and your uncle taking you on this path. I mean, these are just really cool things. How did those things impact you moving into adolescence? When by the time you were in your teenage years, were you in Jamaica or were you already stateside?
Oh, I was already stateside,
Okay.
and I was tricked into moving to New Jersey. I'll tell you that
Really?
story if you
Yeah,
want.
tell me a little bit about that.
Um, um, so, like I said, I lived in Miami, and
Mhm.
eventually my mom and my sisters also migrated.
Let me just make sure I clarify that. So you came first to Miami and they were still in
Yep,
Jamaica?
yeah,
Okay.
I was here for
Talk
about a
about
year and a
adventure,
half
bro.
to 2 years without with like literally the family I stayed with, I'd never met before. I think my grandmother was the only consistency between the
Mm.
Jamaica and the U.S.
Yeah.
But the family I stayed with was totally new to me. So, and didn't have my mother, didn't have my sisters, none of the cousins that I knew. So it was quite the experience. We could
Yeah.
pick at that later, but we were living in Miami. My mom, my sisters migrated eventually, and one summer my mom goes, "Oh, we're visiting your aunt in New Jersey for the summer." And
Okay.
so we kind of pack our stuff and we go up
Sure.
there. You know where this is going. And we get
Yeah.
there
It's
and we're having a blast.
visiting.
Yeah, visiting.
Hmm.
We're having a blast. It's summer, we're staying with some cousins that we do know, and all of that's happening. And then summer begins to cool down a bit and we're like, okay, this is cool. And no one is saying anything about going back or when we're heading back to Florida. We found out, my older sister and I, that summer was over when we were being enrolled in school. Like
Wow.
we
Yeah.
we both had the idea that we're going back to Florida. Yeah, but yeah, that's how I was tricked into moving to New Jersey. It wasn't
Yeah.
a conversation. It wasn't a, hey, this is the thing we're doing. It was just kind of a,
Hmm.
we're here now. Get
Yeah.
ready for school in 2 weeks.
And as you reflect on that time, your teenage years there in New Jersey, what was one of the challenges that you faced and that you had to overcome during that time?
New Jersey was, because I lived so long there. I mean, I had
Hmm.
so many different formative experiences.
Yeah.
Um, some good, some bad. Like New Jersey is where I was introduced to the concept and idea of gangs and
Mm,
gang
okay.
life, and
Yeah.
some of the, I guess you can call it, realities of hip hop and hip hop culture, and
Mhm.
just kind of really sucked into that culture. But it's also where I was, where I discovered who God was, and developed a relationship with God,
Yeah.
and kind of discovered my faith, like figured out what it means to have a relationship with God, and have personal faith that I believe because I believe, not necessarily because my mom wants me to or took me to church or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, it's also where I met my wife, went to college. So many formative things happened in New
Yeah.
Jersey. I
Mhm.
discovered and developed a talent for music, writing raps and producing, and to the point where eventually I actually launched an independent label. When I was fresh out of college. Um, Totally different story, but it's also where I you know, got into some of the, more broken behaviors that I had to
Mm.
unlearn, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
So when did you notice that you had some mental health challenges? Was that in childhood, in adolescence, or you kind of pointed to young adulthood, adulthood? When was that?
yeah, I think it was more so like in early high school, kind of
Okay.
transitioning, where there was
Hmm.
a sense of, for me at least, a sense of wrestling with my identity, like
Okay.
figuring out who I am, who I was becoming, who I wanted to become. Um, you know, a lot of the behaviors that I had learned from, whether it was like some of my uncles or, other role models that I picked up along the way, when it came to what it means to be a man, right? Just
Hmm.
the idea of a man, what it means to
Yeah.
be in a relationship, right? How I viewed women and interacted with women, and what the whole saga of boyfriend girlfriend, especially in
Yeah.
teenage years, as you're figuring
Sure.
that stuff out. None of my
Yeah.
role models were solid, integral men for
Yeah.
the most part.
Sure.
At least none of the ones I actually looked at and paid attention to, because they were there, some of them, but the ones that
Yeah.
were popular, the ones I was drawn to, weren't it
Hmm.
weren't they weren't them. Um, and so by the time I got to, high school, late high school, early college, there was a reckoning personally, where I had another near death experience, actually.
Really?
Um, yeah, this time I went in to remove my gallbladder. It was supposed to be a very routine,
Okay.
surgery, 2, 3 days, you're pretty much good. But then there was a
Mm.
complication, and I ended up in the ICU. I mean, just real. I was in there for about a month. I think it was
Oh,
really
wow.
really bad.
Okay.
And it was around that time, and especially in the hospital, where there was a kind of coming to, hey, life is short. The
Mhm.
time we have, the experiences, the adventure, all these things eventually come to an end, and you have to choose now how you want to use it. And me, that's me talking to myself.
You're so
Um,
young. Like,
yeah, yeah. I was
about
17.
17, yeah.
Yeah,
Not even an adult in our culture yet.
yeah. And I just remember as a 17-year-old, being in the hospital, coming, just having this kind of moment. I guess you'd call it a come to Jesus moment as well, where
Mm.
I'm sitting there and I'm looking at mortality in a way I'd never looked at it before. And I remember calling one of my friends. I tried to call two of my friends, my two closest friends, who are both in my wedding, still my two closest friends right now. Um,
So good.
and one of them didn't pick up, but the other one did. And I remember as a 17-year-old in the hospital, in the ICU, crying on the phone with my other 17-year-old friend, telling him, "Look, man, I genuinely don't know if I'm gonna make it through this one.
Yeah.
And I don't want to die without telling you everything
Mm.
that I know about what it means to have a relationship with God, what it means to have a meaningful life in terms of just who
Yeah.
what I'm figuring out right now, because
Hmm.
I was sort of living this double life, whereas in front of my mom, my family, I was a really good kid, and outside of that, I was a really bad kid,
Mm.
and wrestling with these two
Yeah.
worlds, and they kind of
Sure.
came to a head there, and I had to make a
Yeah.
decision. It was kind of a fork in the road.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you told him, I don't know if I'm gonna make it through this one,
yeah.
because maybe you were even thinking about the one back originally in Florida. Is that what you were thinking? Or were there
Well,
other,
no,
like,
actually,
health
there were
challenges that
others.
you had? Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in navigating sickle cell, you know, I don't know that if everyone knows what sickle cell is, but
I
it's a
think
blood
it'd be good
disorder.
to help everybody. Yeah. Could
Yeah.
you that's how you would describe it? High
Yeah.
high level
It's
blood disorder?
a blood disorder, hereditary. So my mom had a trait, my dad had a trait. So I was blessed with the whole thing.
Gotcha.
And your blood cells, instead of being a sort of, pancake shape, right? This
Mhm.
round disc like shape. It's
Mhm.
sickled, and it's sort of like a C, right?
I see.
And
Yeah.
it's also more sticky, they like to say.
Mhm.
And so it's easy for it to clot. And when it clots, you end up with chronic pain, around wherever the clot happens to be. And
Yeah.
from about, man, fifth grade, fifth,
Mhm.
sixth grade, all the way up until about 11th grade, I was in a hospital like clockwork. I want to say
Yeah.
every 3 to 6 months for at least a week.
Mm.
Like just, on the
Wow.
IV, very strong medication, because that's what it takes to manage and
Yeah.
navigate sickle cell.
Yeah.
They're creating some more significantly more advanced treatment now,
Yeah,
thankfully,
grateful for
but
that.
yeah, they didn't have it for me when I
Oh,
was
no.
when I was
Yeah,
younger.
sure.
And
Yeah,
so it
people
was a
like you
regular
paving the
thing.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a
So
regular thing for me to be in the hospital.
even when you were hospitalized in Florida, you already knew that you had the sickle cell anemia?
Yeah, yeah. I was
Okay.
diagnosed when I was maybe 5, 6 months.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't remember not having it. This has been something that you've had.
There's been 3 constants in my life,
Mhm.
4
Tell us.
now as I get older.
Okay. Mhm.
My mother,
Yeah.
sickle cell,
Mhm.
uh, I like to say God, and
Yeah.
now my wife.
Yeah.
and as an
Yeah.
adult, of course, now we have taxes too.
Sure.
But those are those have been the
Mhm.
most
Yeah.
consistent things in my life. Every
So
few.
let's yeah, thank you for sharing and being so open with that. And I think that for a lot of people that deal with a condition like that they've had their whole life and they don't even know what it's like to not have it, or if they do, the years of not having it are so much less than the years of having it.
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about mindset. And you know this, that mindset is not always a positive thing. There are mindsets that aren't so healthy, or mindsets that are adaptive and that help us to survive. But in your case, having this condition growing up throughout all of these formative years, what kind of mindset did you develop? And
Mm.
it can be positive or negative. I'm not looking for anything in particular. I just want to know, like, what was that mindset like of, because you liked adventure, you wanted to experience things, you wanted to find out who you were like me. I loved hip hop culture, and it was
Yeah.
like I love the music, I love the scene, I love all of this, but it came with some baggage, so to speak. Of
Yeah.
there were beliefs under the surface, there were mindsets that were there that I had to decide if I agreed with, or like, what was my version of this? How was I going to reconcile what was being taught in the lyrics and what was being taught in my community or even in my home? So,
Yeah.
what are some of the mindsets that you could call out, since we've talked about childhood and adolescence? What are some of those that come to mind?
Yeah. The two most prominent, the first for me was resilient,
Okay.
right? Because
Yeah.
I noticed very early on, in navigating sickle cell and kind of being in and out of the hospital, that I had a choice to either adopt a sort of victim identity and
Hmm.
mindset,
Yeah.
or I can adopt a more resilient mindset, one that says, I still do have some control, and I can focus on what I can control. And I always kind of chose to lean towards the resilient mindset, sometimes to a detriment, because I would push
Yeah.
my limit more so than I
Hmm.
probably should have and end up
Yeah.
hospitalized. But um, I always knew I wanted to
Mm.
avoid being and holding on to the identity of a victim,
Yeah.
of just the circumstance, this diagnosis.
Mm.
And as I got older, that mindset kind of matured into a more intentional mindset, and that's kind of the mindset that I've adopted and honed, I think, more intentionally in my adult years, is being very intentional with my life, my time, my focus, my perspective, my relationships. And that's those are really the two. And that's, I guess, that's kind of the progression. I've never necessarily thought of thought of it in that way. But
Yeah.
I know that as a teenager, and as a young man, like early 20s, I I had very intentional moments where it's kind of like, I can be a victim right now. I can decide I'm a victim and join these different groups, and and just kind of complain about, woe is me, this thing, and it's keeping me from doing this and that and the other, because I know folks who have done that,
Yeah.
and that's become their identity. That's become how
Yeah.
they interact with the world, or kind of share who they are with the world in
Mm.
navigating sickle cell. And I never wanted to be that. And I don't mean that in a, I was mature enough to know that was better kind of way. In a way, I was sort of too immature to realize that
Yeah.
there may be some solace in recognizing, no, that the part of this, I am somewhat of a victim in a part of this. Um, but I wasn't mature enough to process it that way. It was just, I
Yeah.
didn't want to be weak. I didn't want to be perceived as weak. I didn't want to operate from a mindset of weakness. And like I said, it wasn't this super mature, I'm going to be resilient, I'm not going to be a victim. It was just, as a young man, I have amazing friends who partnered with me through my illness. Like, I
So good.
mean,
Yeah.
they would skip practices to get me my homework. They would
Mhm.
come and visit me at the hospital when sometimes
Yeah.
family members wouldn't. You know,
Mhm.
these are kids at the time who were taking a
Yeah,
bus to come
sure.
visit. So
Yeah.
like
Shout
these
out to
these are
them.
my right.
So good.
Um
You don't hear that a
and
lot.
no, not at all. And I mean, these guys, we've been brothers now for 20 plus years. We've known
Yeah.
each other and have been doing life together. These guys really helped me in
Yeah.
navigating that because
Sure.
they've seen me at my weakest, in crippling pain to the point where I can't
Yeah.
stand on my own.
Mhm.
Um, and they've seen me overcome and push through. But those are
Yeah.
those are really the two mindsets, and the intentional mindset is what has, I think, helped me
Sure.
lean into like the cognitive psychology and understanding the mind and what makes us
Yeah.
tick and how to live in a way that actually is in alignment with who you want to be, who you believe you were designed to be. Uh, and I think that's a massive part of why I do what I do right now.
The victim mindset for a lot of people, it really does serve a purpose in the moment
Yeah,
of being victimized. Like when
yeah,
something is happening to you, it doesn't help you to be like, you're in a hospital bed right now, and they don't know if you're going to make it either at any of those times.
yeah,
It doesn't help you to be like, no, I'm not. I'm in the classroom right now, or I'm at my job. You can acknowledge life is happening to you right now, and you can
yeah,
use that mindset. But once that moment is over and you're out of the hospital, that's where there's that fork in the road, and you have that choice. And so I love that the way that you described it, and helps a lot of people to see, because you know this as a coach, but there's so many people that get stuck in that victim mindset. It has a purpose. It
yeah,
basically helps you say, hey, look, you need to focus on surviving this thing.
yeah,
You need to get through this. Like, this is not the time to go to the gym and work out, try to run a marathon. Maybe you can do that if you
exactly.
want to. But right now, you need to focus on healing up, letting your cells recover, letting these clots go away, or whatever is going
Yeah,
on in that specific situation. But honestly, there's so many people, and I know that growing up in those communities, I mean, that's it. Even shows up in lyrics of like, we're against them, they're against us, and because they victimize us, but we're the ones that are victorious, and there's that narrative there. So I love how you looked at that opportunity of like, I can get stuck in this mindset, or I can choose resilience. And then even taking resilience is like, I'm going to get back up. If I get knocked down, yes, I got knocked down. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't get knocked down. Like some
yeah,
kid, "Oh, no, I'm not crying. You were really crying, or you really get knocked down." But then you got back up. But you took it a step further and said this intentional mindset. I love that. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, because you're saying that it's not just getting back up. It's not just bouncing back and saying, got knocked down and now I'm up again. But the answer to the question of, what am I going to do now? So in light
yeah.
of and I know your story is far more complex than we've addressed in these 30 plus minutes. But I think that gives people a good enough understanding to be able to say, well, what did this guy do with it? He had this intentional mindset. How did he nurture that? Where did he go next? So that's what I'm
Yeah,
asking. Maybe other people are too, but could you tell us, like, what happened? So you call your friend, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this one. You obviously make it. What,
yeah, yeah.
get us to tell us the bridge of events that got you to where you are today.
I'm gonna attempt to give the abbreviated version
Yeah.
because
Thank you.
I don't
There's a
I
lot
don't
there too. Yeah.
yeah, we don't I know for certain we don't have the time for the list of people I would
Sure.
need to mention
Yeah.
who were pivotal. I mean, just
Yeah.
absolutely
Sure.
foundational to my, I guess you can call it survival, my resilience, my
Yeah.
growth, my
Sure.
maturity. But what got me from there to where I am now? Uh, there are two answers. that I'll give, and
Cool.
I'll preface with this: if you're listening and you're not religious, or maybe you're from a different religion, please understand. I'm not sharing this in an attempt to speak up or down of where you are or what you're navigating. I'm just sharing my experience, and truly what I think helped me,
Yeah. Thanks
and
for
it
that.
may be different for you, and that's okay. And I think it's important for you to know that. But there are two answers. The short answer is I genuinely believe in that moment, because in that come like that reckoning that I had,
Yeah.
where I was old enough to understand, the limitations of life and how short life can be. I came to a moment where I decided for myself, I'm going to I'm going to attempt to accept God's invitation to live in a way that honors Him and see what happens. And that's what I genuinely, to the fullest of my ability in that moment, decided
Mm.
that's what I'm going to do. And from that moment, I've never second guessed it or looked back. Like, I have
Okay.
my doubts like everyone else, and I've done my research, and I wrestle with those like any mature believer, I think. But for me, that's an anchor,
Mm.
a state that has shaped the from that point on in my life, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I'm gonna say, the short answer.
Yeah.
Um, a longer answer now is, from that moment, there was my choice was to live intentional. My
Yeah.
choice was, I'm gonna begin to step into the potential that the
Mm.
people who have loved me and have spoken potential into me up to that
Yeah.
point in my life have pointed out to me, and more specifically, my mother and my older sister, two of the greatest examples in my life of resilience, of intentionality.
Mm.
My older sister is still one of my role models in my life. Uh,
So
Sorry
cool.
if you didn't know that before. Now you do if you're watching this,
Yeah.
Sean. But she is one of the
Mm.
role models in my life. She is the first
That's
person that I've
great.
ever seen,
Yeah.
uh, just do what she does. But anyways,
Yeah. Could I just kind of pause you there for a second, Paul? Because is it fair to say that you even had some examples in your household for that resilience mindset of getting
oh,
knocked down
absolutely,
and getting back up?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So just as an example, my mother, for
Yeah.
example,
Okay.
um, m- and let me know if this is a bit too heavy. All right, and we can work around
We,
this if
we
necessary.
well, you're already going there. Let's go there.
When my father was murdered,
Mhm.
he he was engaged to my mother, if I recall
Yeah.
everything correctly. He
Okay.
was engaged to my mother, and a
Yeah.
part of why he was murdered was because she was pregnant with me, and he was choosing to get out of that lifestyle.
Yeah.
But because of who he was, and what he did, and everything he knew,
Yeah.
you just don't get out of the lifestyle. And so
Mhm.
they chose to end
Yeah.
his life and
Sure.
attempt to use his body to ship drugs from the US to Jamaica.
Yeah.
And when
Sure.
that didn't work out, they threw a nice funeral and, essentially said good luck. Now, my mother was the first of her siblings to go to college. And this is after all of this, right? Go to
Yeah.
college and finish,
Wow.
do all of that wonderful stuff. She migrates to the US, gets here. The college she went to in Jamaica gets flooded. They lose their paperwork and stuff. So there's no record of her earning her college degree. So she goes here. She goes and gets her GED, goes back to college, and earns her bachelor's, and begins to rebuild again. Like, when you talk about resilience, I don't have to look very far to see it at play, to see it at work. For someone who bounces back and just keeps going, just keeps moving forward. So I didn't have to look very far at all.
Both stories are just as cool. Like you developed this mindset on your own. That'd be cool if that would have happened. But being
Yeah,
able to see the legacy that's that's here of you having the epitome of this mindset in front of you And I agree with not even just the resilience, but going to the intentionality. Because just waking up and doing something the next day, for those of us that have struggled with mental health issues or illness, that's hard just to be able to function, but to be able
Yeah.
to go beyond surviving and to say, well, what would thriving look like? What would
Yeah.
happen if I did get my degree, and if I did, even with that setback that's there, and keeping on and moving forward. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that there's both of those examples are so helpful of how she really did pass the legacy on to your sister and to you. It's
Yeah.
the gift of mindset.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And for me, like from that point on, because prior to that moment, and when I was 17 in the hospital, sickle cell was always just sort of a thing I had to deal with. It's like a missing arm that you had to learn to live with,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Okay.
Um, but from that point moving forward, it was now a not a missing arm to navigate, but like a pet to
Mm,
train, to learn how to live with, not necessarily in a way that, like, oh, it holds me back or
yeah.
limits me, although it does some of that to some extent, but it was more
Mhm.
so a, okay, this can't be just accepted, right?
Okay.
Now you and
Yeah.
I, for me and sickle cell, we have to figure out. I have to figure out how to navigate you in a way that doesn't put me in a position where now I am just completely missing out on what maybe I'm supposed to be doing in life. And so there was a level of intentionality, right, coming out of that resilience or in partnership with it, that had to come into play, where it's like, now I got to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what I can do, what I can't do, how far I can push myself versus how, maybe when I shouldn't push myself. If there's a career path that I'm going to choose to pursue, like I went on tour because I really kind of took my music seriously, starting in college, and I was able to tour the east coast of the U.S. with a group of people. And I got halfway through the tour. We started from upstate New York, and we got down to South Carolina, over into Tennessee and such. And I got really, really sick, halfway through that tour, and I had to leave. Like, I was in the ER in somewhere in Tennessee, and left there at like 2 o'clock in the morning, went back, picked up my stuff, went straight to the airport and flew to Jersey and went straight to the hospital there. And so it was just a surreal experience, but all of these things have honed this intentionality, this sense of, well, what I do in the evenings, in the mornings, with my days, with my time, has to be very intentional if I want to get to where I'm going. And because it has to be so, I guess, extreme for me, right, in order to process and navigate my hurdles, it puts me in a position now where maybe for someone else who hopefully isn't navigating something as extreme, but even if they are, I have a lens that I can look through that understands where they're coming from. That empowers me to be able to walk alongside them in developing that intentionality. Um, and so, that's kind of the one of the bridges.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's a couple of different routes to every point in your story. And
Yeah.
and I wanted to just kind of zoom in a little bit of, like, we understand mindset and what you said so far, but one of your specialties has been burnout. Can you tell me how that came about?
Oh, um, in many ways, but chief of which is my health and
Yeah.
intentionality and so on. There are times where I still get overzealous,
Mm,
and
okay.
this I want to make this as clear as possible, because I think sometimes people look at someone like you or myself and go, oh, well, they're teaching it, they're coaching it, you know they must have it together. They must have it on their wraps. And I don't always have it on the wraps. I don't always, have it mastered. There are times where I catch myself and I have to realign. And I'll ask you a question in a minute on that, but I have to realign sometimes. Um, but for me, there was a I started a job in 2017, and I was really excited. I was, it's something I'm really passionate about, and I loved it. I loved what I did, and I hit the ground running because I had a really, you know kind of hardcore plan that I was kind of mapping out. And okay, for this year we're going to walk through this. Um, in the department I was taking over, they had navigated some difficulties. So there was a lot of rebuilding and, restoring health and all that. And I worked my plan, but I didn't plan for the work impacting me. And so I got to the end of the year, and I was burnt out. And I got burnt out doing something I loved. And it threw me for a loop,
Yeah,
to say
pause
the
right there
least.
for a second, Paul, because I think that a lot of times people think about burnout only showing up when they hate their job.
Oh,
So
such a
you
myth.
calling that out, saying I got burned out doing something that I loved.
Yeah.
That's a key point for a lot of people, because that's how we accidentally find ourselves there. Because you can, otherwise it's like, man, this is grating on me. I don't like this job. I don't like my boss. I don't
Hmm.
like what I do. That's a little bit easier to spot. But when
Yeah.
did you become aware that it was burnout?
It so we got to the end of the year and there was a Christmas
Yeah.
break, from just before Christmas to New Year's. And I was really looking forward to this break because, we had a pretty effective, productive year and meeting all the metrics and deliverables and such. And I got to the end of this year, I got to my break, and
Mm,
I realized I was essentially broken. I was exhausted. I was
mm,
navigating anxiety and depression like I never had before in my life.
yeah,
I found it difficult to get off the couch to just
yeah,
engage the day. I was sleeping for most of the time. And that
mm,
break was a real eye opener. It was
yeah,
draining, but it was a real eye opener. And so I started that year, 2018, with just just research. Like I dove
mm, mm,
into researching burnout and fatigue and life balance, and like just really looking into it because I was like,
yeah,
I'm literally doing something I love and I'm burning out here. This doesn't make
yeah,
sense.
mm,
Um, and that's when I started this journey towards learning what burnout is, what it means to have life balance, and how sometimes really kind of the best things in life can be the things that throws your balance off
yeah,
because, like
mm,
you said, it's hard to spot.
yeah, yeah. I think it's. I mean, there's challenges all the way around. I mean, burnout is just a lot of people don't even know about it. I think I'm grateful now that people are talking about it. People like you are calling it out, and I think it's so easy to think, well, I'm broken and I should give up and I should be discarded and just quit.
Yeah,
Or burnout, it being a thing, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is something that maybe I could recover from. Maybe there's something that I could start doing that could help me in this. And so I think that that's really cool. That again, going back to the mindsets that we just talked about, is that it's not only about saying, okay, well, I'm a victim, but you said, nope, I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to be resilient and I'm going to get back up. But then you're intentional, and it shows up, and you start researching.
yeah,
You start looking, hey,
yeah.
what's going on with me? And I would say that, well, let me ask you, not just say something. Did you ever have an experience and research it before? Like, did you ever say, oh, something's wrong, something's not right with me, and then you start researching to try to learn how to manage that? Like, did that happen in a time before?
um,
Like, how did you have that inclination to say, I think something's going on, let me learn about this?
I wish I could say, given everything I've experienced in life, that I had a habit of doing that, but I didn't.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
I don't think there was a another experience that I had like this that led me to dive so deep into research. Not even sickle cell.
yeah,
And I think a
sure,
part of that was because I was, in and out of hospital, so talking to doctors. I didn't really
yeah,
necessarily feel the need to
sure,
do any deep dive,
yeah,
but this was the first time.
yeah, that it got
I
more intentional to
Yeah,
that level. And
yeah,
so the reason what I was going to say, because I wasn't going to keep it from you, but I just wanted you to say first, is that when you came out of the hospital after you talked to your friend, you listed off a bunch of different questions. You know,
mm,
what is this? What can I do? What can I not do?
yeah,
You rattled them off real quick like a boss, just like, man, these are some things I'm asking myself. So I would describe that as like a foundation of like you're starting to use yourself as a case study. I'm like, I'm gonna learn all about this. Like again, I
yeah.
could read what sickle cell anemia would be like for someone else, but I want to know what is it like for Paul? What's it
Yeah,
like for me?
it
So
really
I
was.
this is something new that you didn't have your whole life.
No,
You didn't have burnout your whole life, and this is something that happened, and then I think you took your mindset to the next level.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I so I'm gonna share two thoughts, but the first
Please.
is that first experience really was an internal
Mm,
kind of research time, right? I didn't
yeah,
even think about it like that, where it happened and I didn't necessarily look out. I didn't go Google or get books or anything. I just started paying more attention to what I'm doing and
yeah,
how my days are going and everything. Whereas this happens now, and it was a very external
yeah,
kind of approach.
sure.
I had never noticed that split
Mm,
before. Um, but this random thought popped into my head
okay.
that I just realized. Since I found out my wife was pregnant, I've gotten this deep interest in understanding my story, like in looking
Mm, okay,
intentionally at my story and
cool.
processing the different parts and elements of my story. And I've been trying to figure out different ways to do that is creative and consistent. Um, and so it's just really interesting that this conversation is is that, as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah,
right? It's kind of
sure.
a springboard for me. So this has been really, really cool.
Cool. Man, I'm so glad. I'm so glad because this is something that has been the driving force of even having a podcast and is that I've known you for about 3 years and I've known your story. But when you're friends, you don't start at the beginning. It's like choppy. I got this detail, I got that detail. And in one conversation, we're getting all of this. But to be able to kind of like use some boundaries, I'm like, hey, let's start at the beginning. Let's work our way through and see what it's like. That is really helpful for us as we see that. But here's what I would say is that your story and not just the details, but the narrated story, the narrative that you have of these details is the greatest gift, the greatest legacy gift that you can give to your kids and the other generations.
Mm, wow,
Because that's what
wow,
that's you had a way to see that in your mom. Like she didn't write it out, maybe she didn't hand it to you in a book, but
yeah,
you lived it. And so I think just taking it to that next level is being able to write it out, being able to understand it. And there's so much research that shows that the health of a parent and the success that's there is determined by the parent's ability to make sense of their own story. And I'm summarizing this. This is for those that really love this. It's like the research that's been done on attachment theory and the adult
yeah,
attachment interview. So if you want to look that up, please, I'll throw that out
mm,
there. But it's goes back to that same concept. And before we get too far, I did want to just talk a little bit about the books that you've written. If I can pull those up here, Life
yeah,
Balance was the first one, right? That
yeah,
you
yep.
wrote, or at least that you published. Was this the first one that you wrote?
It's the first one I finished writing.
Okay, cool. Love it.
It's the first one I
Yeah.
finished writing and first one I published.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
So tell
yeah,
us a little bit about what made you write this book, because I mean, some of us can draw our own conclusions, and so you might just want to do that for us real quick. But why did you write this book?
yeah. So I started all this kind of external research in 2018 on life
Okay.
balance and burnout
Yeah.
and kind of understanding it. And it led me into a process of beginning to develop my own planners that I would use personally
Mm,
for helping me to
okay.
manage a pretty
Yeah.
overwhelming schedule.
Okay.
And I found, the more I use this planner, the more other people were kind of asking me about it and asking me for it. And, it was just kind of this different thing. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, so I shared it with a few people, and
Mhm.
eventually I transitioned from my role at that job, and I decided I was blogging for a little while, and I decided, oh well, right now I don't have anything specific that I'm going to be doing, so let me just get back to blogging, and I
Yeah. That's
decided, okay, I'm going to blog. Uh, I was writing, and I wanted to put together kind of a compilation of a few blog posts for
okay.
my audience as, hey, let me give this to you. These are some things I've learned, that I've
Mhm.
been using that I found useful. And I started compiling, and I didn't stop. Once I kind of found the elements I was working with, kind of the raw
Yeah.
basic pieces of it, I started just writing and writing and writing. And, what was supposed to take a week to quickly put together and send out turned into 8, 9 months of writing intentionally, intensely,
That's
just
so
these
good.
experiences and lessons that I've learned and putting them
Yeah.
together, and life balance was born.
Okay.
And so I
Yeah.
published that uh, December of 2020, if I remember right,
Hmm.
and it's
I
changed
remember
the
a few things about
trajectory.
that year. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
oh
good
yeah,
year for that. And so I want to thank you for sharing that. I think that that's a good example of that intentionality, that in being able to roll with the inspiration, to roll with like, hey, I want to help people. That's the root of what is behind why you
yeah,
do. I see that in your story and everything that you've shared today. But even being willing to say, okay, well, I'm not just going to make this a handout or a PDF. I'm going to go to the next level and make this available and accessible. So I love that. And just give us a little bit about the daily dose.
yeah. So the daily dose was a result of, I finished life balance. I published that, and I got really good feedback.
Yeah.
Um, Lots of good traction and everything. And I got a few friends who were just kind of like, man, I'm just not a really big reader. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I bought your book. I've gone through it, and kind of skimmed it, to be honest, because I want to
Yeah.
support you, but I'm just not a big reader. And so I wanted to
Mhm.
write something for folks like my friends who were not big
Yeah.
readers but wanted to
Mm.
get into reading, and they wanted what they were reading to be
Yeah.
inspirational, to be
I love
helpful,
that. So
just
cool.
quick, to the point. Here's the big idea, here's how you
Yeah.
apply it. Not overwhelming. And so that's what the daily dose was, is
Yeah.
designed and written specifically to be
Mm.
that, for
Cool.
individuals who are just kind of like, I want to improve my life, I would like some help. Are there any resources that would kind of hold my hand through this and not overwhelm me? And that's what a daily dose is.
That's great. That's great, Paul. And if people listening to you today are just like, man, I like this dude. He's cool. I want to learn more. I want to access these books. I want to know what he's talking about. Maybe I want him to be my coach. Where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, well, you can find me, you see my name here. If you just type in paulwcroswell.com, you're
Look at
able
this.
to
Look at this
find it
puppy
there.
chulo right here. I'm going to pause you. Look at that. That. So I think you
Yeah,
have. I'll throw up the other one just in case. Either way, like you said, right?
yeah.
They'll
They
point
can
them
go
in
to
the right
Croswell
direction.
Coaching as well.
Where you're
Hmm.
covering your bases, so they can look for you. They can look for your coaching practice
Yeah,
and hit you up.
yeah. And all the
You
links are there. So if you want to find
okay?
me on social, send me an email. All that information will be, if you go to either of these links, they'll take you to all that information. You'll be able to find it.
Love it, Paul. Thank you so much. Did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about, or any question that I missed, or anything about your life that you wanted to throw out for the audience and
Oh,
community?
well, not anything necessarily um, about my life that, I mean, we can have another conversation at another point. But there was a question I had for you, and
Okay.
because a lot of folks don't know this, but for our relationship, I think you see it in a very mutual way, and I'm honored by that because I've shared this with you. I sort of look up to you. I've
Mm,
watched your journey and have learned a lot from you, your wisdom in
mm.
our conversations. I've called you for advice plenty of times, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Okay.
Where
Well, I'm ready. Hit me.
um, I've navigated, overwhelming and losing balance, and kind of helped other people.
Yeah.
And I always try to learn what are some different ways to look at this to navigate this. So,
Mm,
the question for you is, what are some good ways, healthy ways that someone can bounce back or recover from overwhelm in seasons of
mm.
life where, I mean, they just they've lost balance, they feel overwhelmed, they're not really sure what the first steps are to begin to recover.
Like you said, you alluded to it. Like, as a coach, the requirement for being a coach, just like being a counselor or a therapist, is not that you have a perfect life and you've figured everything out.
Yeah.
So I've been there, and so what has helped me, what has helped other people that I've worked with, is overwhelm. It basically does that. Is it overwhelms you? It's like if you think about being submerged in a pool, or it's like you are head is not above the water at that
Yeah.
point. And so from a brain perspective, at that point, we're not able to process anything except the overwhelm alarm is buzzing or sounding, and it's not pretty. It's not like this beautiful um phone alert that's just like ding, ding. It's
Oh, I
more,
wish.
yeah, it's more like a fire alarm. And so it's saying
Yeah.
you need to do something different. You need to get out of the building. So when you have that, it actually starts with awareness, with being able to say, I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Mm,
Because that's what it makes us feel like, well, that's the last thing we need to know. Well, duh. I'm already experiencing this. But for us, in as human beings, we can be experiencing something and not have expressed it. So there are parts of our body that are all in on this overwhelm, but they're not necessarily communicating at that point. So when we
yeah.
can say, "Oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed. This is what's happening. This is," I mean, if we just look at some of the things that happen in your life, it's like you could say, I lost my dad, or my mom can't come to the hospital, or my friends, I'm having to call them and they're taking buses and they can't come, and family members can't come. Like, there's all of these different things that, even if you look at them at face value and stack, they're not as big. But if you stack that on top of that, on top of this, on top of that, that's where
Yeah.
the overwhelm hits. So when you can hit that in your mind with some awareness and say, "Oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed and this is what is going on," it actually brings a sense of empowerment. Like you said, this, now I'm being intentional. I can't control all the things that are overwhelming me, but I can control that. I'm going to let my awareness go up to the
Yeah.
highest level. What is it that's happening in my life? And what we find is that once you allow that awareness to be there, then you'll start asking those questions. Like the ones that you asked after the hospital, of like, well, what can I handle? What is it that I'm doing?
Mm,
Where am I going to go
yeah.
from here? So that's evaluation. So moving from
Okay.
overwhelm, and that you're getting better when you start asking questions. Where do I go from
That's good.
here? What am I supposed to do right now? And that's what is really general. Is it could be different for every person, but it all starts with getting out of the avoidance, which that's what feels natural. Is I should avoid things, instead saying, I'm gonna lean into this. I'm gonna get some awareness, and then you start evaluating, and then that's when your body is ready for suggestions of like, maybe I could try this. and then
Yeah.
you go do an experiment and try it.
And I
Because
love that you
yeah,
said that.
please.
Just real quick,
Yeah,
because I
please.
know
No,
that
love it.
there are times where folks they'll go, well, I'm afraid to lean in because I don't know if I'll be able to get back out. Like if I
Yes.
lean in, will I be
Mhm.
overwhelmed too much so I feel like I'll be stuck
Yeah,
there?
sure.
What would you say to someone who kind of has that mindset?
Yeah, I think that it's you have to know the difference between, um, sticking your finger in a wound, and that's very graphic, I know, but I don't need people to forget this. I want them to remember
Yeah.
sticking your finger in a wound and cleaning it out.
Mm,
So so when you feel
yeah.
overwhelmed, if it's because of a wound, if you stick your finger in it, then yes, that's your body is telling you, "Don't touch that. Ow, don't touch it." But if you understand, I have the tools that I need, I have the support here, a nurse or a doctor or somebody that's trained in first aid or yourself, you're washing this wound. And so you're being gentle. It's not throwing awareness in your face,
Yeah.
but it's gently starting to clean out that wound. And then you understand, just like we've hit this a number of times, is that recovery is going to be a journey. Overwhelm means you hit your max capacity. So you're
Yeah.
not going to be done with the effects of the overwhelm tomorrow.
Yeah.
You just want to be able to say, I feel better. I feel better. I still need to clean out the wound today, but that initial clean out was today, and I cleaned it out, and now I'm starting to feel at least the pain of recovery instead of the pain of the actual wound,
Yeah.
the
That's great.
original thing that happened. And that's what happens in relationships, and is that you come and tell me, "Hey Peter, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now." And I say, "Well, have you tried taking a long bath?" So I'm jumping all the way down to what you should do, and you're just like, I'm sticking my finger in your wound now.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
"Last time I do that, I don't want to talk to him anymore because I'm going too quickly to what you should do."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when we work together, "Oh, you're feeling overwhelmed. What's going on?" And so all I'm asking for is, what is it that's stacking?
Yeah.
What are
It's
you
amazing
overwhelmed
how powerful awareness is. Like as you're
with? It
saying
is.
this, I'm just kind of processing that. Like a little bit of awareness can sometimes be the difference between, full blown life derailment and, slight detour to recovery.
Because I think we see that throughout your story. I think you're a living example of this,
Yeah,
of there were action steps that you had to take after every
absolutely.
hospitalization. And without even knowing it, because that's why I was asking, without even knowing it, it set the groundwork to be like, I'm not just going to get back up, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
So that intentionality, but you have to be ready for the intentionality.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
if you
that
try and
part.
do, because you saw that, yeah, because
That
otherwise
part.
you're like, I'm going to get out of the hospital and I'm going to start training for my marathon. Like, that's a cool story. That'll go viral. I'm going to do that. But instead saying, okay, I want to run a marathon,
Yeah.
but I just want to be home tomorrow. If I can just set that baby step of like, I'm in the hospital now, I want to be in my own home, I want to sleep in my own bed, that would be
Yeah.
cool. And then I want to be able to walk to the restroom without somebody having to give me their shoulder to get there. And so
Exactly.
you start setting these goals there. And as you do that, you're learning how to go from head under the water to head above water.
And I think
But
one of the keys as I'm listening to you, Peter, is don't 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 underestimate the power of a baby step.
yes,
Incremental progress makes all the difference.
yes. And that's a good thing, that like intentionality and incremental, they
Yeah,
go together. And there's a memory aid there. They both
absolutely.
start with I. Because I mean, think about how mad you would be if you were struggling to keep your head above the water and somebody says, "You know what you need to do? You need to learn to freestyle." I saw the Olympics and they do this freestyle, and that helps you. Like if you knew the freestyle, you could get out of this pool, this lake, this river, whatever it is. And that's what we do. So
Yeah.
when you can say, oh, you know what? Just move your feet like this real quick, and then I'm going to go get a tree branch or something. I'm going to help you. But I just don't want, it's like these immediate things that there is victim elements to it. Let's survive that. Once you get out of it, you start to feel resilient. You're getting back up, and then the intentional training happens. And it's every training sequence is incremental.
Yeah.
That's what you see there. So overwhelm is no different. So I think that what I would say to you and everybody else is that a lot of times, if we submit to the process, if we slow things down and we allow ourselves to process and validate our stuff to the point that our brain is ready to start asking questions. Hey, what could I do? How could I get out of this? Don't take any action yet. Just start asking questions. And once you're asking questions, that is a sign of health. You're getting better. And once you're ready to say, well, I'm ready to take some action here, let's see what it's going to be. I'm going to research about burnout because I know that wasn't day one necessarily or moment one. But at some point, you started researching about burnout and life balance and all these things. And it turned into a book. Like there's no limits on where it can go. Like I'm not going to ever look at somebody that's in a hospital bed and say, you'll never run a marathon. I don't know. But let's set a baby step.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of full circle, I guess, but the idea that life is an adventure
I love
and
it.
the next chapter is unknown, and you
Mhm.
can write the next chapter. It takes, like, I mean, this entire conversation so far, I think, has just everything you've just shared has been worth, for anyone listening, the gem that you just shared has been worth. If they listen to nothing else, I want them to hear that part, because that right
Mhm.
there, can be the difference between, like I said, your entire life being derailed and looking back with regret,
Yeah.
and you literally looking back and going, I never thought that was possible for me
Yeah.
to get from there, but here
Sure.
I am, and being able to
Yeah.
help someone else. And I I don't know if I can emphasize that enough, but for anyone
Well,
listening,
I
listen to that
appreciate you
again.
saying it. I appreciate you saying it, Paul. And because I really do think that your story is powerful and people listening being able to see that this is an extension of your mom's legacy. Tell her I
Yeah,
said hi and tell her I
I
said
will.
thank you. Because I've
I
read your
will.
books and I think that there's such quality content there. But to me, what sets it on fire in the best way with passion and desire to see it happen in our own lives is that you've actually walked this out. That you just didn't say, "Oh, I'm just going to choose burnout." It's like you know what you're doing. You've been there before. So I appreciate you giving us the gift of your story today, and I'm excited for any future relationships that come from people listening to this, watching this, and I would love to have you back sometime because I feel like every
Love to
topic
do
we
that.
hit, we could have gone deep. And so I'm casting vision someday, would love to go deep. But for today, thank you, Paul, for hanging out with me. And we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks so much for having me. I had a blast. This was an honor.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and follow.